Ever notice how the most successful people you know barely post anything on social media? While everyone else is documenting every meal, every workout, every minor accomplishment, the people actually building empires stay silent. This isn't random. This isn't coincidence. There's a psychological reason why real success and social media don't mix. Here's what's happening. The average person posts on social media because they need external validation. They need strangers to confirm their worth. They need those likes and comments to feel like their life matters. It's a dopamine hit, a temporary fix for a permanent insecurity, and it becomes addictive. But truly successful people don't operate on external validation. They've built an internal sense of worth that doesn't need constant reinforcement from people they've never met. They know what they're building. They know where they're going. They don't need to broadcast it to feel real. Think about the last time you saw someone posting constantly about their business ventures, their side hustle, their big plans. How often do those plans actually materialize? Almost never. Because the energy spent seeking validation online is energy stolen from actual execution. You're trading the work for the appearance of work. You're choosing the audience over the achievement. There's a psychological principle at play here. When you announce your goals publicly, your brain gets a premature sense of accomplishment. Neuroscience research shows that telling people about your intentions gives you a dopamine reward similar to actually achieving them. So you get the feeling of success without doing the work. You broadcast the plan, collect the praise, and your brain thinks the job is already done. The motivation dies before the execution begins. Real builders understand this intuitively. They stay quiet not because they're secretive, but because they're focused. Every minute spent crafting the perfect post, choosing the right filter, monitoring the engagement, is a minute not spent building, and they value their time too much to waste it on digital performance art. Watch the pattern. The person constantly posting about their gym routine rarely has the physique to show for it. The person posting about their business hustle every day rarely shows profits. The person documenting every moment of their relationship often has the weakest foundation, because they're performing their life instead of living it. Successful people also understand something crucial about information asymmetry. They know that broadcasting your moves gives competitors a roadmap. It reveals your strategy before you've executed. It invites opinions from people who've never built anything themselves. It opens you up to criticism, distraction, and energy drain from sources that don't matter. The billionaires you admire aren't on Instagram sharing their morning routines. The entrepreneurs actually scaling companies aren't making TikToks about their productivity hacks. The men building generational wealth aren't seeking likes from strangers. They're too busy building to care about being seen building. Here's the brutal truth. Social media is designed to make consumers, not creators. It's designed to keep you scrolling, comparing, seeking validation, and feeling inadequate. The platform wins when you're addicted to the feedback loop. Real success requires you to break that loop entirely. It requires you to build in silence and let your results speak. You want to know who you really are. Look at what you do when nobody's watching. Look at the work you put in that never gets posted. Look at the discipline you maintain that never gets documented. That's your real character. That's your actual foundation. Everything else is performance. So watch for the pattern. The loudest people on social media are usually the least accomplished in real life. The quietest people are often building empires you'll never see until they're already established. They're not hiding. They're just focused on reality instead of perception, on building instead of broadcasting, on results instead of recognition. Stop performing your life for strangers. Stop seeking validation from people who don't know you and don't care about your actual success. Start building in silence. Start measuring your progress by what you've actually accomplished, not by how many people witnessed it. Real success doesn't need an audience, it needs work. And work is what happens when you close the app and start executing. The choice is yours: broadcast or build, perform or produce, seek validation or create value. But understand you can't do both. Not really. One is the illusion of success, the other is the reality of it. You walk into a room full of people talking, laughing, competing for attention. Everyone's trying to be the loudest, the funniest, the most interesting person there. And then you notice someone sitting back, observing, barely saying anything. But when they do speak, the room goes quiet. People listen. That's not shyness. That's not social anxiety. That's strategic silence. And it's a sign of real confidence most people completely miss. Here's what's actually happening. Truly confident people don't need to prove themselves in every interaction. They're not performing for validation. They're not competing for status. They already know their worth, so they sit back and watch while everyone else exhausts themselves trying to be seen. They understand something fundamental about social dynamics. The person talking the most is usually the person who's the most insecure. Think about the last group conversation you were in. Who dominated it? The person desperately telling story after story, joke after joke, interrupting constantly to redirect attention back to themselves. That's not confidence. That's fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of becoming invisible. Fear that if they stop performing, they'll stop mattering. Confident people don't have that fear, so they don't need to fill every silence with noise. The psychology behind this is simple. When you're secure in yourself, you don't need constant external validation. You're not measuring your worth by how much attention you're getting in the moment. You're comfortable with silence, comfortable with observation, comfortable letting others have the spotlight because you're not threatened by their presence. Your value doesn't increase or decrease based on how much you talk, so you only speak when you actually have something worth saying. Watch what happens when a confident person finally does speak in a group setting. Everyone stops, everyone listens, because scarcity creates value. When you're not constantly competing for airtime, your words carry more weight. People lean in, they pay attention, because they know if you're choosing to speak, it's probably worth hearing. You've built credibility through restraint, through selectivity, through understanding that less is often more. But there's another layer to this behavior. Confident people stay quiet in groups because they're gathering information. They're observing social dynamics. They're reading the room. They're understanding who has real power and who's just performing power, who's authentic and who's putting on a show, who's worth engaging with and who's just noise. Silence gives them a strategic advantage. They see things the loud people miss because the loud people are too busy performing to pay attention. The insecure person talks constantly because they're terrified of what might happen if they stop. Will people forget about them? Will someone else become more interesting? Will they lose status in the social hierarchy? So they keep talking, keep performing, keep exhausting themselves in a desperate attempt to maintain relevance. The confident person knows that real relevance doesn't come from volume, it comes from value. And value reveals itself through quality, not quantity. Here's the brutal truth. Most group conversations are just people waiting for their turn to talk. Nobody's actually listening. They're just thinking about what they're going to say next. The confident person recognizes this pattern and opts out. They're not interested in participating in a performance where nobody's actually connecting. They'd rather observe, assess, and engage only when there's genuine substance worth engaging with. Everything else is just social noise they don't need to contribute to. Some people mistake this quietness for aloofness or arrogance. They think the quiet person believes they're too good for the conversation. Sometimes that's true. But more often, the quiet person is just comfortable enough with themselves that they don't need to prove anything. They're not arrogant. They're just selective. They understand their energy is valuable, and they're not wasting it on shallow interactions that don't serve them. There's also a power dynamic at play. In any group, the person who needs attention the least often has the most. The person who's comfortable with silence controls the room more than the person filling every gap with words, because people are naturally drawn to what they can't easily access. The quiet, confident person becomes intriguing, mysterious, worth pursuing, while the loud, insecure person becomes background noise everyone learns to tune out. So watch for this pattern. In any group setting, identify who's performing and who's observing, who's desperate for validation and who's secure without it, who's talking to be heard and who's speaking to add value. The person staying quiet isn't invisible. They're deliberate, they're strategic, they're confident enough to let everyone else fight for attention, while they sit back and choose when their voice actually matters. Real confidence doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It's comfortable in silence, secure in observation, patient in waiting for the right moment, and when that moment comes, it speaks, and everyone listens. That's the difference between performing confidence and possessing it. One needs constant validation. The other just exists, unbothered, unshaken, unmoved by the desperate need to be seen. Next time you're in a group, try being the quiet one. Watch what happens when you stop competing for attention. Watch who tries to pull you in. Watch who respects your silence. Watch how much more you notice when you're observing instead of performing. You might find that real confidence isn't loud. It's quiet, and it's powerful precisely because it doesn't need to prove anything to anyone.